Good morning, everyone. I'm Elysia Buss. I am the host of Horsepower Empowerment Through Connection, and today I have the privilege of getting to talk to Emily Kieson, who has a unique and fabulous perspective on the world and integrating horses and humans within it. So Emily originally hails from New Jersey, but is currently living the extraordinary life in southern Sweden as she continues to teach about the horse-human interactions and the equine, it's not a model, but we're going to get into that later, but teaching people different tools and skill sets, whatnot, to bring equine therapy and learning and programming into the world. Emily, thank you so much for being on the show today.
It is my honor. Thank you very much for having me.
You're so very welcome. So you have so much to get to talk to us about today. Let's start in the beginning in New Jersey. What first brought you into your experiences with horses?
And I think I had probably started when I was about 10 years old. As most, girls do, like summer camp, 10 years old, like, oh, horse is great. And a couple of years later, my mother got her own horse, and then it kind of just snowballed from there. Horses then became part of my childhood and my upbringing after that. I grew up mostly fox hunting.
Oh, interesting.
On the East Coast. And so most of my learning about horses and learning how to ride was not in an arena of any kind. It was out on trails, literally just strap yourself to the saddle and go. And then...
And for people who don't know what fox hunting is, do you want to just briefly dive into that? Because they're just like, you're hunting foxes?
Yeah, that's probably a good point. Yeah, we don't know. No. And in the US, it's not allowed to actually kill the fox. So that's just I realize that people think, oh, fox hunting in England, where they did do that, but they don't do that in the US. And even in the middle of the country, they do they do fox hunting, but they hunt for coyotes, and it's more chasing. It's basically there's hounds, and those hounds are trained to pick up a specific scent, in this case a fox, and then everybody gets on their horses and they wear pretty fancy clothing things, and then there's all kinds of fancy etiquette involved, and little sandwiches with like cucumbers in them, and a lot of port,
port, I mean,
Oh yeah, no, you're drinking at all ages in this crowd. And then you go up at like sunrise and you go racing across fields, jumping over fences and hedges and whatever's in the way. And then everybody's exhausted, including the horses at the end of this. And then everybody goes home. So yeah, that was kind of how I grew up in New Jersey. And then, let's see.
It just sounded all really
complicated
funny.
after that. Yeah, it's like, oh, what happened after that? I ended up going to school for my undergraduate was actually in ecology and evolution. So horses were just sort of it was a wonderful part of my life, and I loved my horse. After college, I ran off to the Peace Corps. After that, I ended up down in Austin, Texas, because I met some girls from Austin when I was in West Africa, and then ended up in Austin, Texas, where I picked up the horse thing again. And because
it's Austin, Texas.
Yeah, it's Texas. And I ended up pretty much making it a full-time job at that point. I had other jobs in the meantime, and then I brought my horse back down there, got back into it, ended up becoming a full-time riding instructor and trainer. And at the same time started to get a little bit involved in equine-assisted therapies. So what happened was that during all of that time, I never taught for competition. And even though I trained and took lessons under a variety of different things, from classical dressage to and hunter jumper to Western pleasure and trail riding or whatever I could find, I took lessons, and I took all clinics you could think of under all kinds of horsemanship kinds of things. And what I was missing in there was the understanding of what was going on between the horse and the human. And no matter who I asked, they couldn't give me a clear answer. And everybody had their own theories and approaches to how horses and humans actually communicated, and what that interaction was that made it so special, and why people were so into this, and why horses and humans communicated the way they did. And I also felt like something was missing. And so somebody mentioned, oh, well, you should get into horses or equine assisted therapies, because, it seems that would be where you would find these answers. And so I did. I went and I I think at this point I'm certified in the 6 different models of equine-assisted therapies.
Like tell us about the different models.
Oh, cool.
What's 6?
Let's see. I think my
There's
first
like
one
150
was,
of them. So
oh, I know, and they keep growing and growing and growing.
I know, it's
so,
crazy.
so I started, I think, with EGALA. I took the training with EGALA, and then took a training with natural lifemanship. And PATH, so the equine specialist in mental health and learning with PATH, and SPUR, which is specifically in Oklahoma. And that's a model that's used at a boys' home near Tulsa. And then PATT, which is specific for trauma therapy. And maybe that's it. I can't remember. And then, and the trick is I would ask people, because I figured, okay, here is the world where, if anybody knows about horses and humans and what's going on in that interaction, that would be where, and nobody could give me a clean answer. It was really difficult to I came across, contradictory and conflicting information, and I got very frustrated.
Understandably so.
I went back to school and ended up with went back to school to get a graduate degree in equine science. And it was during that time that I figured out that the research that I was looking for, the science, while some of it existed and what was there wasn't getting to where it needed to be, the actual research of like equine-human social bonding communication is nowhere near where I thought it was supposed to be or where I thought it was. So then I went back to school again to get my doctorate and a master's. So I have in psychology and comparative psychology to look at horses, humans, and those interactive capacities. And at the same time, sort of shifted my attention away from the model-based system and met Katarina Lundgren, who started MiMer Centre, and started developing other educational opportunities to sort of raise the standards of equine knowledge in this industry.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, like, I love your pursuit of knowledge. You're like, I want more.
I know.
It doesn't make
and it's
sense
never
to me.
ending
I'm keep
either.
pushing until I find what I want.
Pretty much, yeah. And it's a constant push. It's a constant push because we're constantly doing even more research and collaborating with people and continuing to look for things that, in my opinion, we need to try and find. And it's never ending, and it will never end.
Because it's science.
Exactly.
So what does your research typically look at for a format?
Well, I look at a few different things. Everything that I specifically do obviously involves horses on some level. It doesn't always involve humans. So like I have between 700 and 800 horses that I look at specifically in Oklahoma. Wow. And those are everything from some moderate to large sized feral herds and large socially stable domestic herds to large non-socially stable domestic herds and smaller herds too. So, and in those studies, I primarily look at equine affiliative behaviors. So how horses create and maintain social bonds and social friendships, what their herd dynamics look like when they are socially stable versus not socially stable. And what I mean by that is most of our herds we have in our backyard we would consider not socially stable, meaning they didn't choose each other. They're usually smaller. We chose the herd for them. And a lot of people are in boarding environments, for example, where horses are moved around a lot. Whereas like in the feral communities, in terms of horses, they stay together for many, many, many years, and they choose the herds they get to be with. So just looking at the social dynamics, and again, what makes a horse without the human component? And then what is that social life, and where do those behaviors start to change once we start managing or creating different environmental structures for them?
Yeah.
And so that's what I look at from specifically the horse side. There's a lot of research on stress behaviors. There's not enough on affiliative behaviors. And so that's where I primarily dive into the horse research. And part of the reason why I do that is because I want to know how we can better communicate and socially bond with horses. And is it possible to do that?
Yeah.
We know a lot about humans and dogs. We know a ton about, because dogs live with us. They're our companions in our homes. Like we have a
Right.
lot of research there and it's great. We don't have nearly the research on the horse side. So, so in addition to looking at all the horsey stuff, I also look at horse-human interactions, how horses respond to different kinds of interactions with humans when they present behaviors or initiate interactions based on previous experiences with people. So what types of experiences do they like, and what do they innately, or I should say, intrinsically respond to, as opposed to shaping behaviors, which is sort of like that positive reinforcement, where it's a training method. You're positively reinforcing something. That's an extrinsic motivation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for when horses intrinsically want to be around humans. Under what conditions does that happen, and what does that look like? And then taking the social information to see, okay, their social strategies, what do they look like when they're making and maintaining friendships with themselves? And what of those behaviors are carrying over into the horse-human interaction? And same from the human side. We have a lot of research on how humans create friendships and relationships. And so where are these overlaps, and how can we really facilitate that?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for doing all of that for both horses and for humans.
It's a lot of work, and I'm thankfully not the only one doing it. So it's yeah.
No, that's really cool. I just love talking about the science of working with horses. So when you first came to, gosh, let me back up. So you've traveled to a bunch of different countries.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
How many countries have you been to?
I'm not sure. I would have to start counting.
You're like, give me a second.
If I have to, I don't know.
You could say all the countries out loud.
Okay. I started traveling when I was in high school, and my first country was Ireland. I've been to a couple different countries in the Caribbean during that time too, and Mexico, Canada, of course. And then my best friend lives in France, so I've been over to France a whole bunch, and then Italy, Greece, Turkey, Switzerland, obviously Sweden, because that's where I am right now, Finland, Denmark. Haven't been up to Norway just yet. I've been to, let's see, the Czech Republic, Netherlands. Then I'm going to lose track of
somewhere in
Greece.
Africa?
Yeah, definitely Africa. Then there was Mauritania, Senegal, Gambia. I spent a semester abroad in South Africa when I was in college, where I went to Zambia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique.
Super cool.
I don't remember. Yeah, so yeah.
A bunch of places.
Yes. Enough to keep my mind busy a bit, yeah.
Yeah, clearly you got a little bit of gypsy in your blood.
A little bit, yeah. And it's great because it gives me a new perspective on humans.
Yeah.
And it always gave me a new perspective on myself and the culture that I lived in and the culture that I grew up in, and how, while that's one lens to look at the world, here are other ways to see things.
Yeah, and of all those places, like, how many were you able to interact with horses within?
I would say that most of them. I don't think I interacted a whole lot with horses when I was in Southern Africa, but I lived in a village in Mauritania, which is where I was in the Peace Corps. And there were a lot of horses, a lot of camels too, but there were a lot of horses and donkeys. And it was actually kind of beautiful in a way that if you saw pictures, people would say, oh my gosh, that horse has poor welfare. Like he looks underfed. Maybe his hooves aren't trimmed. Maybe his mane isn't brushed. But the people in that, and they were primarily men because of the way the culture worked, primarily men who interacted with horses. They lived with their horses. Their horses constituted their livelihood most of the time. These were the horses that pulled their carts, or that were part of the agricultural system, and they spent more time during the day with their horse than they did with their family. And so they had these interactions with the horses that were very much on a colleague partnership kind of side of things, where it was in their best interest to take very good care of the horse and to have this sort of interaction where it was a mutually beneficial to a point. Maybe it was just a working relationship, but it was very respectful.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Did you find that in all the cultures that you engaged with horses?
No. I honestly, that was one of the better things that I like, even though you look at this horse looks slightly emaciated, again, feet aren't trimmed, maybe he's got a couple open wounds somewhere. They do the best they can with what they have. But in terms of the interaction with the horses, they were often, in some ways, a better psychological interaction than what I often see in some very developed areas. And I've been at barns, very, very highly acclaimed barns in Geneva, to fancy boarding and breeding facilities in the US, and where, horses are, isolated, kept in stables, and yeah, they're shiny and pretty, but that doesn't align with their psychological needs. And so I see a lot more stress behaviors in those areas than I ever did in say these third world countries.
That makes sense to me. Nobody likes being stuck in a box.
No, and especially with, we're all social animals. We need to move around. We need to express ourselves. We need to learn and be enriched by our environment. And then for horses, that's often taken away. And in their best interest, this is, people have good intentions. They always, most people have good intentions. It's just a lack of information and a lack of, I think, understanding of what really horses are. Most of us think of horses as, there's this magical, pretty animal, and we want to do the best we can to take care of this animal. But I think it's often forgotten about that this is, horses are a social species that come from a whole different background that had nothing to do with humans. And so when we start to integrate ourselves into their world and start to manage their world in a way that doesn't necessarily align with how they evolved, things are going to happen.
Yeah. In the cultures that you went to, were there any particular cultures that looked at horses from a more spiritual aspect, like that alignment?
I would say almost all of them, but in different ways. In fact, it's funny you mentioned this, because we were just in Lund, which is about half an hour from where I am right now, and there was an exhibit on horse people and the history of horses in this area in regards to how they were, yes, they were also eaten for meat at some point, but also, decorated and buried with ceremony and like all kinds of different ways that horses have played a role in different cultures. And there's definitely I would say a spiritual aspect to the horse human part of thing in almost every culture. Sometimes it's toned down and sometimes it's not very expressed in a way that comes out as part of conversation, but it's inherent in the way that people organize their thoughts and interact with horses, that in some cases almost puts them at the magical unicorn status, and in other cases it's like this amazing creature who's allowing me to be in their presence sort of feeling.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'll have to look up that exhibit later. Send me a link. So in regards to your travels in the equine industry, what's it like as an American traveling to all these different countries and working within the equine industry?
Right now, being an American abroad is very interesting in general.
I imagine.
Given the political climate. It's always been interesting being an American traveling abroad, because the American politics seem to be a part of conversation no matter where things are going on. Whereas Zimbabwean politics isn't necessarily something that people talk about in Sweden, but American politics seem to be sort of all over the place most of the time.
Interesting.
Makes it interesting to move around because people's ideas of America sometimes come out when they're interacting with me, and then we just have to have a conversation of like, okay, I'm an American, but that does not mean that I always align with what you're going to hear about in politics. Traveling abroad right now during the pandemic is certainly very interesting in general, just because of the regulations that are in place. And I'm used to traveling. I'm used to going abroad. I have my passport with me all the time anyway. This is a whole different level of complexity. I was traveling, I had Sweden being one of the only open countries at this point where you can actually have trainings like we do. I was here in May, right after things started to really shut down. So I had to figure out a way to get here back in May. And that was definitely an adventure, having to go through very complex paperwork just to get through airports and be able to get here. So that was, it was interesting. But in the horse world, it's been one of the things that's really interesting about doing this during this time is that because people are at home and because they can't go out and be with other people, they have almost more of a need to find solace with the animals and companions they do have at home. And one of them being horses. And so
I've definitely found that to be true personally.
Yeah.
Like, I need to go see my horses.
Yeah. And again, with the rise of anxiety and stress given to the climate right now, it only seems normal for people to be thinking about new ways to integrate, mental health opportunities or growth opportunities into the spaces they still have left, one of them being horses.
Yeah.
And so it's a really interesting time for this field.
That's cool. When you come to the different barns and whatnot in the different countries, do you notice like how you approach the horses and like how they're approaching the horses in your communication, that it's easy to stay in alignment and communication, or are there some more difficulties with perspectives, or like how do you navigate all of that?
You mean like my personal human approach to interacting with horses and the people there, their human approach? Yeah, it's a little bit different. Only because, I mean, one of the things that I do with MiMer Centre is we put together a very short kind of workshop called Equine as Companions, or Friendships with Horses is also another name we use. And it helps people to understand, again, the horse as a horse, and, human as human, and looking at other ways we can interact with horses and facilitate this type of companionship, friendship, social bonding strategies that often get left behind. Because most of us think about horses in our backyards or in our stables, and we think about, what are we going to do with our horse? What goal do I have? What am I going to physically be doing? We never ask that question when we have our dogs. Like, nobody says, oh, you have a dog, what do you do with your dog? Or, what do you do with your cat? Because they're just your friends. They're just there as companions. Now, somebody might say, yeah, I do, I go out and we do Frisbee with the dog, or we have
agility training, or
yeah, all of that. But it's not a guarantee. That doesn't necessarily have to be part of the conversation. But with horses, everybody's always says, oh, what do you do with your horse? And so there's this other space that's involved there of creating and maintaining these really intricate social connections with our horses that honestly, again, there's not a whole ton of research there, but it's beautiful stuff that comes out of that. And there are activities that can fall into that realm, but most of us sort of focus on this behavioral shaping side of things, where it's that 4-quadrant model where we have positive and negative reinforcement and punishment. And most of the training mechanisms we have, and the most of the tools we have, most of the ways that most of us have been taught to interact with horses fit into that. It's fit into behavioral shaping, where we have an idea of what we want, and then we go out and we find a way to achieve that with our horse. And then there's this other side that gets forgotten about, or not even touched upon because nobody even thinks about it, or they never even thought it existed. Is that like, okay, what about the horse? What does the horse want to do? What choice does the horse have? What if the horse initiated contact and asked you to do something? Do we know what that looks like?
I had that happen to me just yesterday when I was hanging out with my horse. I'm going to just share this story because it's super cute.
Yeah, please do.
So yesterday I went out and to hang out with my horses, and I put them in this larger field. It was a little hilly. I just like take the brushes with me, and they're at liberty. And they decide when they want to come like hang out with me and have me brush them, and then they leave when they want to go do something else. And one of my mares, she came over to me and she just kind of looked at me, and then she laid down on the ground like 2 feet from me, which is like a big deal. And then she like rolled, and I'm like, look out for the legs. And she doesn't usually do that in like such close proximity. And then she pushed up on her front hooves and then started kind of like rocking like she had an itch on her belly. And I was like, oh, okay. And so then she went back down and she let me like rub on her, and then she got up, and then I itched her belly some more, and she did the head wavy thing that they do when they're like, yep, that's the right spot. And I just thought that was so beautiful that she had so clearly communicated what her needs were. And she's like, I have an itch on my belly. Will you please help me out? I can't quite get what I need out of them.
Yes. And it's this wonderful space where it's not just us talking to our horses and telling them what we want. It's about them communicating to us and allowing for that space. And I hate this. I mean, it's part of the equestrian world for the most part, is that space is often just overlooked. It's not even part of the topic of conversation. And I didn't always know about that space. So I was not like, oh, look, I'm, I like,
I'm not judging other people. I'm just like,
hell no. Yeah. Like I grew up in equestrianism, and when I discovered that there might be something beyond this 4-quadrant spot, I honestly had no idea what to do. Like, I just stood and stared at my horses for about a month, and it was like, I'm not even sure how to navigate this. But then I tried things out, and then I, did more research and did all kinds of things, and it has become a beautiful journey ever since then. But it is a weird place because most of us, know just, okay, we know how to train and ride and teach our horse things, and then when it comes up that, well, what if the horse asked you, what if the horse initiated something and we went along with that instead? What could happen? And it allows for a 2-way communication rather than the 1-way communication. And so getting back to your original question of me walking into places in all of these areas, people honestly have, sometimes they don't even know what I'm talking about. But there's a surprising number of people who do, which is really exciting. That there's because when I first started this process, I thought I was alone. I didn't know anybody else who was thinking on that, this other space out here. But the more I talked to people, the more I found people, which was great because I thought I was insane. So it was it was awesome. And then I'm like, oh, if I am insane, at least I'm not insane alone.
That's funny.
But it's great. It's beautiful. And then, and what's happening is that it's a growing dialogue in the horse world, which is wonderful. And it means that there's more people playing around with this and more people opening up to opportunities of basically interspecies communication. And it's what I have found is that people have a tendency to get very impatient because they want to do things, like they want to have something to do or achieve, when really it's the process. It's not even achieving anything. It is the process. It's like any other good relationship in your life. It's not about getting to marriage or getting to whatever this is. It's about enjoying this space. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. That's true.
Just be real about it for a second. They're like, I've got a timeline. I remember my 20s,
I got married by 25.
It's just like, he doesn't ask me to marry him by this day. We're done.
Yeah.
I've got timelines I gotta hit. I'm just like, you do you. But anyways.
Yes.
So at the MiMer Centre, so tell me a little bit more about the different things that you offer there and base, and because you're doing something different out there versus all the different models that are out in the equine industry.
That's right. Yeah. Katerina is also, she's taken models too. And she came, it's funny because we both have been thinking the same thing even before we met, in that like there's like, where's the science research and where's the education to, especially on the horse side, to really understand what we're doing in this atmosphere. And it applies to all models. Like, it's not just like we, are specifically targeting an education that's only for this model. This is about understanding the horse realm in the equine assisted activities, therapies, and learning, understanding the human side too, and recognizing what that interaction is, what role the horse actually plays, the importance of especially psychological welfare of the horse in this realm, and what that means, and how we can better understand that and facilitate it. Because if we have better welfare for the horse, well, then we're going to have better welfare for the human, because that's, it goes hand in hand. And so what we did is because she got frustrated too about, raising the level of education. You've a lot of people in this field who do equine assisted, all kinds of things. And the human element, whether it be, coaching or occupational therapy or psychotherapy or anything else, there are very specific things that that person has to know in terms of qualifications, certifications, whatever you have to do. And there is no standardization on the horse side, like none. And so we decided we wanted to at least put something out there so people could get more knowledge on the horses. And so we dove into the research and science. And as I mentioned, we continue to do our own research, but we developed training to sort of get into that horse side, to say, okay, here's something that needs to be filled. And so we're doing that, and it applies to all models. So what we're doing is we're developing tool sets. Like, here's your toolbox. Here's all kinds of information and skill sets and things that you can use to make whatever you do better. And it's about owning the information and being able to use the information in a sustainable way wherever you are and whatever you do, to facilitate better interactions for horses and for humans in whatever capacity that comes together. The problem came is that we started developing this and it got too big, meaning like we had way too much information that we wanted to put in here. So we start with, we have 4 levels, but that's only because we ran out of room in level 1. So we had to, so we just had, okay, here's the basics. And then, level 2 takes some of that even deeper and adds on some other elements. And so when we get into the horse and the human side in this, we talk about neurobiology, we talk about physiology, we talk about, a lot about equine behavior and equine cognition and equine behavioral psychology, but all in a way that can be applied for each individual who comes. And so the idea is to go through all of these, gain more knowledge, and between them, play with that and practice that, not with real clients, but with each other. So we create networks of people that they can practice on each other. Yeah, because it's not like, oh, here, go do. Practice on your clients and come back and tell me what went wrong.
Tell us how that went for you.
Yeah, exactly. And then so it's about facilitating networks of people who can practice and support one another and throw around questions and come up with new ideas and sort of develop things on their own in a way that's sustainable, again, for them, where they are, for their cultures where they are, for the practices that they have. Exactly. Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, no, that's just all really good stuff. How do you bring forth the equine welfare aspect of it?
So it takes a little bit of time to sort of ease people into that part of it. And I know that sounds weird because they're like, oh, of course, horse welfare. But most people think about
weird. It sounds weird to me, but some people would struggle a little bit with like how that you got to give it to them on a gradient. So they don't feel really bad about it and like shame themselves for not doing, X and Y and Z, because people in the world struggle with, shame and invalidation sometimes.
Yes, especially in the horse world. A lot of it in there. And so we talk about, okay, well, typical people usually think about welfare as like physical welfare, freedom from thirst, freedom from pain, freedom from whatever. And then, looking at it slightly differently, like what if they had freedom to do whatever they wanted? What if, what is it about horses that makes them horses, and how are we potentially interfering with that? And how is that going to affect both their physical and psychological well-being? None of us want to hear that we're doing something that's like hurting our horses on any level.
Yeah.
And again, it's never intentional. Most people aren't intending to do anything. It's just a function of, lack of knowledge. And I have to applaud anybody who's willing to step into that space of discomfort and questioning what they're already doing, because that's a hard place to be.
On any level, any conversation piece.
Exactly. And so, like, kudos to anybody who's willing to step into that space. And then we have to, question, okay, what actions have I been doing that I could potentially change? What other things can I integrate into this environment to potentially improve upon my horse's psychological well-being? And how can that be integrated into the understanding of what we're doing in equine-assisted programs of any kind? Because if the horse has a choice and gets to be there and actually knows what a choice is and understands how to express curiosity and exploration and be able to say, you know what, I'm done. And so they have the opportunity and the facility to do self-care on their own.
Yeah.
And not be forced into an interaction, not be used as a tool in any of this, which sadly is often the case. Then not only if we can integrate this sort of agency into that, not only are we improving the horse welfare, but it actually improves the programs that we're doing too, and the output on the human side. Because we ourselves are then modeling good interactions with another being, because we're allowing them to have agency, we're allowing them to say no, we're giving them choices. And so by just modeling that improves the programs. And then again, having a horse that knows how to do all of this and can be a behaviorally expressive and change their behaviors based on what's going on gives a lot more output for the other side of it in terms of what the human learns too.
Oh, absolutely. And what they can carry forth in like their interactions with other human beings.
Exactly.
Since most people struggle with communication, just in general.
Yes, exactly. And so
with other humans, let alone
yes.
with us.
Exactly. Yeah. The interpersonal skills part, like
you're like, what is that?
Yeah. That part of things that some of us, me included, sometimes are missing. And for many reasons, horses are great for that. One, it's not this unconditionally loving being like dogs are. Like in therapy, dogs are typically there just to be pet or show unconditional love. Horses, it's a whole other integration of interacting and facilitating a communication strategy for, earning trust as opposed to it being a given. Lot of different parts of this that are very specific to horses that, if we understand those more and we give the horse more agency in that world, then again, even better ways of reaching people in these environments.
That's great. So speaking of having like an open heart and open mind and communicating with our horses, what are some obstacles that you personally had to overcome to be able to live your dreams?
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, when I figured out that this was something that was sort of, I couldn't put down, like it was something that I just needed to move forward with and learn more about. And I left a relationship in Austin because I was down there for almost 10 years, broke that off. It wasn't very a healthy relationship anyway, so that breaking that off ended up being a really good thing. But I left everything behind. I had my dog and my cat and some books, moved up to Oklahoma to take a job, what I thought was supposed to be a part-time job, meaning like a temporary thing for like a month, ended up lasting for 8 years.
Wow.
And
must have been a good job.
Yeah, it went from full-time to part-time to really, really, really part-time. But during that process is when I sort of, I got to know myself better then too, because it was like, it's sort of like that purging everything. What do you have left? It's me.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so who am I? Who am I in this process of what do I want? And part of that was sort of just, rebuilding myself during that and recognizing what I wanted and being okay with what I wanted. Because even if nobody else thought it was okay that I wanted to go off and be this crazy research science horse lady, it was, it's easy to say, oh yeah, I just did it because I believed in myself, and but that's hard when there's seemingly no one around who either understands or is like highly supportive.
That's true.
Because here I was going back to school in my mid 30s, taking loans out so I could go back to school, and for no guaranteed outcome. It was just a drive of needing to know more because I believed that I could contribute something. If I knew more, then I could contribute that. And that's a lonely process. And especially, and especially going back to school when you're older, like a little bit older, it can be a bit difficult to integrate yourself into that space. Where all of a sudden, especially when I went back to school at Oklahoma State, I'm in this space with a bunch of 20-year-olds, and some of the staff is treating me like I'm a 20-year-old when I'm older than they are. And it's a humbling process. And again, when there aren't that many researchers in this field, because part of it is because there's not much funding in this field, but there's not many scientists who are doing this. There's a handful, there's about 5 or 6. And again, like, I was super passionate about it. None of the staff at the university really understood what I was doing. So I had to kind of go off on my own and self-fund my own research, raise money to go to conferences, kind of do things off the books sometimes in terms of, trying to find ways around the system because the system wasn't supporting me.
Right.
And again, not knowing where I was going to end up on the other side. And to be honest, I'm still not sure where I'm going to end up, but it's okay. Like, there's this part of it is being comfortable with the discomfort. And don't get me wrong, there were a whole lot of struggling in there, in terms of feeling like I don't belong anywhere, feeling like I don't have that, maybe I am totally crazy and this is something that is going to take me nowhere. I'm going to dig myself into a ton of debt and just have like nothing on the other side of this. That's a very, very lonely place to be. And I have to, I'm very thankful for the support, just the emotional support of my friends who, while they may not have understood what I was doing, that at least they were, encouraging. But that loneliness and that struggle is hard. And also questioning, like, here I am trying to find this other space with animals that I'm hoping, that I believe in, that it's there. And then, and thankfully, not exactly sure how it happened, but things started to become a little clearer. Just tiny bits. It's not like, woo, everything kind of came clear.
You didn't have one like giant thing. It was just like, and now everything in the world.
Everything's good. Yeah. No, it was just like one step at a time. Take one more step. Just take one more step. One more step. One more step. And that gets hard. But then all of a sudden, one step, the next step. Oh, I met one person. And then 4 more steps later, okay, here's another one. And then 8 more steps later, here's 4 more. And okay, here's someone who's interested in what I'm talking about. Oh, this is great. I can collaborate with them on a project. Yeah. So it is a very, so that's part of this. And part of this is also understanding how passionate and driven I am on this subject, that obviously I'm not giving it up.
I love it. Fantastic.
So, yeah.
I'm very grateful that you're here and that you're doing the work that you're doing. I don't think that you're crazy. I think that you're really, like, passionate about what you're doing. And while that can seem crazy to other people, that's merely their own personal experience, and it's not about you. And
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. Like, I feel like craziness has to do with a lack of logic.
So, yeah.
But you're a researcher. So I feel like you must have a bunch of logic. And just, like science is amazing. And a lot of people don't understand science. And there are a lot of complexities to it. And some people, unless they're at like the top of that particular field, like only those people are really going to understand at that level, right? Does that make those people crazy that are at the upper echelons of like their field? No, it doesn't make them crazy, because other people are just like, that word has like 15 different pieces to it, and it's just so long. You're like, I got to the end of the page and there just wasn't any room. Should we hyphenate it? So I just want to throw that in there.
Yeah. I mean, having mingled and met and involved with a lot of academics, especially in recent years, you could say there, a lot of them are maybe socially inept on some levels, but
that's fair. I feel like researchers spend a lot of time, just with the subject matter that they're researching, because they're really passionate about it, which is what it takes to do like quantitative and qualitative, like longitudinal studies. And need to not be disturbed. And then you come back out into the world, and then you're like, oh yeah, these people are not the thing that I've been researching, and they're not like the small group of humans that I've been interacting that has all the same like terminology. And then you're like, wait, what? And people just, their eyes like glaze over, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm doing that thing again where I'm using
where I'm using all those specific words and talking about my little niche of a subject and getting super excited about it.
Exactly.
Or, somewhere off thing. I mean, it's it's a different kind of world, but it is, like you said, it's a special kind of crazy. We're all special in our own way.
Yeah, no, see, I didn't say crazy. This is special. We're just gonna take that right out of it. It's unique, a special kind of uniqueness. That's like, it's beautiful. And the world gets to have a bunch of different individuals that get to make up the whole. Like every person has their own role to get to be part of the whole. And that's the beautiful thing about being different. Like, you don't want everybody to be the same. Oh my gosh, the world would be so boring if everybody thought the same thing and looked the same and oh my God, just be like, bleh.
And that's the fun. The fun part is having our own, like being our own people, and then finding people who we can authentically and truly connect with.
100%.
And even if those people are one or two people, that's pretty lucky.
And understanding, like, we're never going to please everybody. Like, we're never going to have our concept agreed with by everyone around, and understanding how to just stand true within yourself and just be kindly, just agree to disagree. And that's okay. And those people can go talk to somebody else, like, because sometimes you just come to an impasse. Like, both people have said everything they have to say. There hasn't been a change in perspective, and just be like, well, thank you for sharing your life perspective with me, and we're at an impasse, and I hope you have a wonderful day and perhaps a wonderful life, and goodbye. And I'm not going to be negatively impacted by that experience, because we have that choice, right? We get to choose how we experience the world and how much of another person's perspective and energy we're going to take on.
Absolutely. And we can be fully supportive of one another in that process, even if we don't agree on things.
Exactly.
That's a nice place to be.
Yeah, 100%. So I want to be mindful of your time. And I know you said you had a little bit.
I'm okay.
You're okay? I just wanted to check in, because mindfulness is important.
I do have just a few more minutes, and then I have to, like I said, I have to go pack. So
perfect. Yes, because she's on to her next adventure.
Jumping back to collecting data, collecting clothes, and then
woman after my own heart, people. She's a gypsy like me. She's been to more countries than me, but I'll get there.
You'll get there. You will. Just let the world open up and you'll get there.
Exactly. I'm coming. And so in the YouTube video, we'll have the description on the side, and we'll make sure to have links to Emily and all the cool research that she's doing. Well, maybe not all of it, because some of it might not be public yet. You're just going
Yeah, a bunch of things are being written up right now, so hopefully it won't be too long. But I do have some papers published, and you can always find me on like Google Scholar or whatever too.
Fantastic. We'll try and put some of those links in there. And Emily, before we wrap up, I love to ask this question: who inspires you?
Everybody.
Everybody inspires you. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, even in the short conversation that we've had, you've been incredibly inspirational. Even in the 15 minutes we were chatting before this recording started.
Thank you, Emily. I really appreciate that.
I think that anybody who has the strength to get up and try something new and be true to themselves, and especially if they're looking kind of just taking one step towards something that they love or they dream about or they're passionate about, sometimes just that one step can be incredibly scary. I think. And that it makes everybody brave. You just try one thing that's just about something you believe in, and that makes you brave, and that's inspiring. And so, yeah, and everybody I meet, yeah.
Well, that is wonderful. Thank you so much, Emily, for your time and your candor and your passion that you are sharing with the world today. So I look forward to
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. I look forward to getting to chat later on and continuing to learn about all the things that you're doing in the world.
Same with you. I'm excited to hear more about your work too. So it goes for both of us.
Thank you very much. Well, everybody, thank you so much for watching today. And until next time, bye.